My name is Anne-Lise Wohlers, and I'm a customer success manager here at Looker, working with our enterprise accounts. I've been with Looker about 1 year now, and I'm delighted to be here today with my colleague Maire.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maire Newton. I am a member of our customer experience team at Looker, and I'm responsible for a lot of our education initiatives. And I've been with Looker for a little over 2 years now.
What is a data culture? We've been hearing this term a lot at the conference, just out in our daily jobs. It's a phrase that keeps reappearing. And so what we're going to be talking about today is how can you go about getting started to actually build that? Many of you are here at the conference and realize that effectively leveraging data is central to your jobs. It helps you do what you do, and it helps you be more successful. And it helps your organizations be more successful. So really the question is, how can you empower your teams, your colleagues, or your customers, if you're embedding Looker, to build out that data culture, and one that really sticks? And so in the course of the next half hour or so, Maire and I will talk through specific actions that you can take, no matter how data literate or illiterate your organization is today. We went through who we are. So what is a data culture? It's the combination between two things. One, the access to a data platform, and two, the data literacy to understand what the data means. The data platform and the data literacy. And when you have these two things, that's when people across your organization can actually have the answers to the questions that they have. And they can ask new questions and have new insights. And when you have that, then people can be successful because they can self-serve. And that feeling of self-service is really empowering. It's just like when we go on Google and we type in a question that we have, and the answer pops up right there. We can click on the link, and that feels really rewarding. And perhaps then we go to a series of a couple of links, and now we're deep in Wikipedia, but we've discovered a new thing. And when people are empowered, that's when they get creative. And that creativity leads to innovation. And so at the end of the day, when we're looking to build a data culture, there's a couple of key principles we need to keep in mind. One, it's about investments and a prioritization in data. And that involves bringing in your leadership and getting them on board. And when you have that kind of prioritization in data, that's when we can start to have a focus on education and helping people really understand how to ask analytical questions. And when people know how to ask the right questions to get answers to data, that's when we begin to have data literacy across the organization. And when we have that data literacy, that's when we can begin to solve problems, and we can get creative, and we can think about new solutions. And that's when we begin to build the foundation of a data culture. So that's just a few slides of context. Now let's actually get into it. How do we go about building this? And so when we've looked across our customers, we see a lot of different types of implementations. Everyone's coming from a different place. But across the board, we see central themes when customers are very successful. And those are some of the tips and pillars that we want to tell you about today. So we've broken it down into 4 different categories. And the first thing that I hope you notice about this framework is that it's a flywheel. It's a cycle. And so you can start wherever you are in this cycle and then build to the next piece. And what you do there is going to fuel momentum and continue this flywheel around. And so to start at the beginning, we always want to plan and connect that to your business values, to the core mission that you're trying to do, your goals. And when we've planned, Then we can start building and optimizing the technology and building out the platform. And when we've started to build the platform and we've socialized it with a small group, then we can launch it to our broader base and actually put data in the hands of the end users who can then derive the insights they need. And at that point, we can continue the cycle around again. And that's how we build momentum. That's how we grow. So first, we plan. And many of us here in the audience may be planners just inherently. We've planned our vacation down that's coming a year from now to Hawaii. We know every destination we're going to. Or we're very detailed-oriented when we're planning a wedding. Some of us are not planners, and we just want to jump in and start building and start getting in the details. But first, we plan. That's the key here, before anything else. And so the first piece of that, and I'll share 3 key concepts today in this planning section, is to start with goals and defining your success. And so as a customer success manager myself, the goal of my team would be to deliver excellent customer experience. There's nothing about data in that goal. But the goal of my team is to deliver an excellent customer success experience. And how do we know if we're actually winning, if my team is doing that exceptionally well? Well, we would see that in the metrics. Are they trending in the direction that we are expecting? And so that's why it's key to write down the actual goal from the highest level you can possibly think of, and then write down what are those success metrics. And when you have them written down, you need to communicate them to your broader team. That way we can all track if we're winning. The next piece is being sure that you have the right team on board and that they're engaged. And so what you see here is basically 4, think of them as job descriptions. So think of this as a checklist. It's not necessarily 4 people, or it's not necessarily 4 teams. Organizational structures are very complicated. Different teams are organized in different ways. And so this isn't meant to be just a simplistic 4 people should be involved, but rather you need someone, again, going back to the leadership, that's really there to be your executive sponsor and to champion this idea. You need to have a project manager or someone who can have those qualities that pushes things forward, that tracks our successes, that communicates our wins. And then we need to have both the technical teams, our development teams, as well as the business leaders involved so we can have this conversation. And a lot of you probably have involved folks like this in your implementations. And the message that I want to put across here is that we want to engage them right from the beginning, not bring them down after when we've launched, and this is many months into it. But bring them in right in the beginning so we can all be involved in the conversation. And the conversation that we want to have is understanding the team's need for data. At the end of the day, we want to know what decisions do people need to make on data? What are they trying to do? And so we would recommend using a framework such as this one. Many of you may be familiar with a Mad Lib, when you have to fill in the blank. And so this is kind of like that exercise, when you're filling in what your role is, what you're trying to do, and ultimately, and this is the key, what decisions do you need to make? So to use an example, again, because I can speak from experience, as a customer success manager, I want to see a holistic view of my customer's health. And the reason I want to know that is because I want to make certain decisions and I want to take certain actions. And that action is to proactively coordinate a meeting, reach out when it makes sense, when the customers need help. There's nothing about data so far. There's nothing about metrics so far. This is stating the goals. And this is why it's critical that we have the development team and the business team in the room together, so that way we can walk through this exercise. So I'd encourage you to also think about for yourselves, or for the teams that you want to empower using a data product, what would this exercise look like for them? When you've written that down and you sort of have communicated that, then we can start talking about data and sources. What's going to help me answer these questions? What do I need to know to proactively reach out to my customers in the case of a customer success team? I can probably think of lots of metrics. I'm sure you can also think of lots of metrics that you want to see in your dashboards. And so here are some metrics that would help me understand when is a good time to make that decision and to contact that customer. And so we'll write them down. What are the metrics? And then where are those metrics? Where do they live? What are the data sources associated with that? And so at this point, we've really planned. We've got the stakeholders in the room. We have them engaged because they're able to have these conversations about what do their team need. They're feeling invested. You've written the goals down so we know what we're tracking towards. And we'll be able to communicate at the end whether we've met those goals. So at this point, now that we've done our information gathering, we're ready to build.
So how do we go about building this thing? I was a member of our professional services team for a while, helping with implementations. And this is actually where I saw a lot of our customers start to fall down a little bit. And it's because oftentimes in that planning phase, you get this engagement with stakeholders. And if you've done it the way that Anne-Lise just mentioned, you have a lot of engagement and hopefully a lot of excitement. But when it comes to building it, you probably have some developers, some technical team members going off to the side, and they're going to now build this out. And then the people who are going to be using this data product, they're sort of over on another side, waiting for something to be delivered. Why is that a challenge? Why does that present a problem when it comes to building something with people in mind? And it comes down to something called the curse of knowledge. There was an experiment done back in the 90s, I think it was, where there were groups of tappers and listeners. So let's say that I am a tapper and Anne-Lise is a listener. My job as part of this experiment was to think of a song that pretty much everyone would know, like the Star-Spangled Banner or Happy Birthday, and to tap it out on a table so that she could figure out what song I was tapping. The important part of this experiment is that when the tappers were asked how likely they thought the listener was to get the message, to understand what song was being tapped out, the average response was somewhere around 50%. I would think as a tapper that Anne-Lise is 50% likely to guess what song I'm tapping. Guess how often the listener actually guessed the song? 2% of the time. Why? Why is that? And this is the curse of knowledge. When I know something, it makes it really difficult to unknow it. That sounds really obvious, right? But what that means is that it becomes difficult to empathize or to put myself in the mindset of someone who doesn't know what I know. While I'm sitting here tapping out this song, and try it, think about it. The song's gonna play in your head, right? Well, she doesn't have that. She doesn't have that song playing in her head. So it makes it really, really difficult. And I can't now think about what it would be like to not have that song there. So this is where it becomes challenging when you're building with people in mind. When you have a technical team building out this data product, it's really hard to put yourself in the mindset of someone who maybe doesn't understand or think about data the same way that you do. So what do we do about this? Well, there's a few things, and this is a big one. We have to build something that's going to resonate with people, that's going to resonate with everybody. So we keep them involved in the conversation. All of that engagement that we get when we're planning things out, we keep that engagement while we're building. We work to make sure that everyone who's going to be using this at the end of the day, they understand the terminology that we're using. They understand the labeling, the chart titles. Things that we think are so clear may not be that clear to everybody else. We also try to add context wherever we can. Maybe we're adding descriptions. Maybe we're setting up some sort of online glossary so that someone can go in and just look up terminology if they get a little confused, see definitions for things. We build in workflows. So we don't just build something and hand it back. We involve the users, the people who will be using this at the end of the day, and we ask them to test it out as we go. How would you use this? Put something in front of them, iterate from there, and build their workflows into the final product. And finally, keep it simple. Keep it simple. You can always add more later, but just because we have 156 columns in our database that we're really excited for people to be able to play with, doesn't mean we want to share 156 columns on day one. That's going to be really overwhelming and really hard for someone to navigate if they're not used to working in that sort of environment. So we build something that's going to resonate with people. We also need to give people a starting point. We need to give them something that they can latch onto, something that isn't just a blank page, something that they can use to then explore and continue to answer their questions from there. So we build dashboards, and we work with our users to understand, again, those workflows, understand the types of dashboards that they need, the questions that they're asking. All of those things that come out in that planning phase, we turn that into dashboard starting points. Imagine that you're a customer data analyst and you want to understand cohorts of customers. Now imagine that you have a blank Explore in front of you. Maybe you're not even sure what a cohort is. That's going to be really hard. But if you have a dashboard, something that you can start with and begin to navigate from, that makes a huge difference. So we build a starting point, and then we iterate from there. And then the final thing that's going to be really important is that we need to build for performance. And I think a lot of us who are a little bit more technical out there, we know this, and we think about this all the time. And it is important. How long would you be willing to wait for a website to load? How long would you be willing to wait for your data to come back? Not long. And there's studies that have been done on this. So within about a second, the flow of thought is very seamless. You're waiting, not really, it's fine. Flow of thought is seamless. When you get to 1 to 10 seconds, you might get a little frustrated. You start to feel like you're at the mercy of the computer. Especially towards the end of that range. That's when you're really getting that frustration building. But you're still engaged at that point. Once you get past 10 seconds, that's when your mind starts to wander. Maybe you're checking your email, looking at your phone, doing something else. So not only are you waiting for a long time, but now you have to reshift your focus. You have to take that time to really think about what you were doing when you finally do see a result. So performance is so important. People will be more engaged when they feel like they're in control of what they're seeing. So let's say that you've done all of this. You've kept those people involved throughout. You've planned with them. You've built with them. And you have this amazing data product that you're ready to launch. Now comes the fun part. Now we get to get people excited. Get people excited. Easier said than done, because when we go to launch something new, we are making a change. And any time you make a change, that involves change management. However, there's a lot of really fun things you can do to get excited, and we'll talk about a few techniques today. The first is to build yourself a network of evangelists. All of those people that were so excited, that were involved in the planning, sharing their problems, figuring out how this whole data solution might help them, involved in that build phase, turn them into ambassadors. Anytime you're making a change, there will be a lot of questions and concerns, feedback that people have. Turn those ambassadors into points of contact that can help gather that together, that can evangelize within their teams and within the rest of the organization of why this is so important. And when you have them, work with them to prepare your messaging. I know when I build something really cool, I want to focus on all of the technical details and all this really interesting stuff that I did. But what the person using this is thinking about is, why should they bother? How is this going to change their day-to-day? How is this going to alleviate their pain points that they have in the way that they do their job currently? What does this mean for them? Why should they care? So the messaging should focus on that, not on the product itself, but the way that it's going to be used. And finally, set up communication pathways. This is so important because, again, this is change. People have questions. People need a way to express feedback. And you want to be able to collect and gather that and understand it. So set up communication pathways. Email is really common, pretty obvious. Use things like Slack or any sort of instant messaging tool that you have to set up channels where people can go to ask their questions, to provide feedback. Set up an internal wiki where you can have information. You can develop a community around Looker in your organization. People can post things. They can ask questions there. And finally, utilize in-person contact. Set up trainings, share knowledge. Use office hours. Set up time where someone who really understands from the development team what this whole thing is about can be available for an hour or two. And have anyone who wants to use it come in and talk with them, understand, maybe learn some things. And when it comes to training, it's really important to focus not just on the product that you have, not just on this really cool thing that you're launching, but again, to focus on how it's going to be used. How many of you have ever used a remote control? Pretty much everybody. Can you picture a remote control in your head? Does it have about 100 buttons on it? Something like that? Yeah. So imagine that I am from a different planet, let's say, and I've never seen one before. And you need to teach me how to use a remote control. How would you do that? Would you start at the top and just start going through all of the buttons in order? Maybe the first thing you try to tell me about is the difference between the power button and the system on-off button. That's kind of hard, right? You're probably going to lose my attention very quickly. But my goal isn't to use the remote control. It's to watch TV, right? That's what I'm trying to do. That's what matters to me. So what you should be showing me is, here's how you turn it on. You can change the channel. Here's the volume. Here, play around for a while. Have fun. Watch your shows. See what you think. Come back with questions. That changes things. It changes things because we're not focused on the remote. We're focused on the way it's going to be used. And training should be doing that too. Training should be focusing on the way that things are going to be used. So we've talked about this a lot, but this is about change management. So we're back to this flywheel concept where we're planning. That's when we are getting our shared vision out there. We're getting people aligned with that vision. When we're building, That's when we're getting all the pieces in place. We're actually making this change happen. And launching is when we're empowering people. And Anne-Lise said that word, empower. Launching is about empowering everyone in your organization to understand not what this is, but why it is. Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? How does this help you do what you want to do? And then we continue to institutionalize that change. So when it comes to institutionalizing change, I will let Anne-Lise, who is very knowledgeable in that area, talk about that with you.
So I'm going to start with a question. And that question is, how many of you here today have implemented a data product? You've done trainings. People in your organization have logins. How many people are about at that stage right now? Most of you, a lot of you. And that's awesome. But that's the first part, right? At that point, when you launched your data product, I bet all of you who raised your hand, you had the same reaction, which is something like this. We did it. This thing is off the ground. And you took a sigh of relief. But I have one piece of advice, which is it doesn't stop there. And I think most of you know that. It doesn't stop there. Where the rubber hits the road is about building adoption and continuing that momentum. How can we do that? I get this question a lot. How can we help other teams utilize this data product that we launch? You know, we had a training last month, but I see people reverting back to their old tools. How can we help them get into Looker or get into their data product that we just launched? How do we build that adoption? And a lot of it is the change management that Maire talked about. And it's about connecting people in a way that they understand that this is relevant to their lives, and this can change what they do on a day-to-day basis. And they feel that motivation and that empowerment, just like when you Google something and you can get the answers. So there's many different techniques that you can use to continue that motivation. We'll talk about a couple here that we've seen. The first and foremost is when you put the data product in the hands of people, they have logins. First question to ask is, how did the launch go? What wins can we celebrate? How can we communicate those wins? Are people engaging with the data product? Have they logged back in 2 weeks after our training? 2 months after our training? These are things that we can measure, going back to our goals and our success metrics. We can track these and understand how people are adopting the tool. We also want to understand why people aren't using it and keep our ear to the ground. This is where that communication is key continues to play out. We need to continue interviewing people. Does this make sense to you? Why not? And then as we continue to build momentum, we need to be forward-thinking. We need to think about what's next and stay one step ahead. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is to spread adoption. And why would we want to do that? We want to do that because if we have our director of marketing and our director of customer success and our lead of our sales team all in one room, and we're presenting our numbers to our executives, if we're all pulling from that same central governed place, we're all winning. If I'm a manager of a team and everyone is reporting their numbers, their risks, their successes in the same place, then we're winning. And so that's why we want to spread adoption. And we want to help our teams and our colleagues continue to build on this data product. And we can continue to grow the data product by keeping content fresh and making sure that the dimensions and the measures still make sense, that the dashboards that we have are still relevant. Our business has changed, so let's check in on those goals we set out initially. Are those still the goals 1 year later? I bet your business goals change pretty frequently as your organization shifts. And so we want to make sure that the content and the content that enables people to make those decisions are also staying up to date. And so we want to build out new use cases. And we want to understand how this fits into people's workflows. Because if the team is accessing a certain application to do their jobs on a daily basis, let's put the data in those applications. Let's embed it. Let's bring the data to where the people are going to utilize it. And the reason is, again, because it comes back to an individual. You want to feel rewarded. You want to feel empowered to answer your own questions, so it needs to make sense to you. And when it makes sense to you, then it's going to become second nature to go to this tool as opposed to your legacy tools that you used before. And so we come back to our flywheel. So many of you said just 5 minutes ago that you raised your hand, you were at the stage where you had already launched. And so it's not that you're just in phase 4, build or continue to grow. In fact, you need to continue to look at 1, plan. Let's continue to plan and get the right stakeholders on board. Maybe you have some of them, but maybe you haven't actually interviewed or asked your teams to write out these Mad Libs. So let's do that. Let's continue to build and optimize and check in on our data stack and check in on our dashboards. Are they built with users in mind? Let's ask the users. And then we can launch to a new group of people and empower them. So it's not just one training when you initially launched, it's continuous training. It's having continuous office hours, or keeping that wiki page updated, or being active on your Slack channel so people can continue to be involved in the conversation. And it's being creative to get people involved. Creative ideas. I've heard from a number of people with different incentives that they've had. Here's $100 to the person who has the best dashboard, and we kind of have a competition. Those types of things get people excited and back into the process and continuing this flywheel. So at the very beginning, Maire and I talked about a data product being, or a data culture being 2 things. 1 is the access to the data product, and 2 is the data literacy to understand what the data means. Access and the literacy. And I bet most people here at Join are pretty good at building a data product. And you probably have some pretty sweet dashboards and amazing reports, and you have this incredible product. But the central theme that we've been saying here today is it's really about people. It's really about being thoughtful about how we can engage people throughout this whole process. From the very beginning, engaging people as we plan, building with people in mind, empowering people when we launch, and then continuing to build that momentum for them. And when we do those things and involve people, that's when we can begin to build a data culture within our organizations, within our customers. And that's going to be a pretty rewarding experience for us as individuals as well. That's what we have for you today. Thank you very much.